She came to drop off a birthday cake. A homemade one, chocolate double-layered, wrapped in foil with a card taped to the top that said, "Happy 38, Soldier." She had a visitor's badge, a one-day pass, and a duffel bag with a change of clothes because she planned to be back on the highway by nightfall. She was wrong. Before we show you what happened when the first mortar round hit the perimeter wall, what she did when the radio tower went dark and 14 men were pinned behind crumbling concrete with nowhere to go, in a single line she spoke afterward that the base commander never forgot. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from right now. Hit subscribe and leave the bell icon on, because this story isn't about a soldier. It's about the woman everyone assumed was just a soldier's wife. And what they never thought to ask was what she did before she became one. FOB Kiran sat on a shallow plateau in eastern Kiran province, Afghanistan. The kind of base that existed not because the location was ideal, but because the alternative was leaving the valley unmonitored. And unmonitored valleys in Kiran had a way of making decisions that cost lives. The base had a perimeter of reinforced HESCO barriers, one functioning watchtower, and a reputation among the men stationed there for being either completely quiet for weeks at a time, or suddenly, terribly not. It was mid-morning when the supply convoy rolled through the main gate. Third truck back, passenger seat, pressed against the window, with a foil-wrapped pan on her lap and her eyes on the mountains. Sergeant First Class Diana Voss was 34 years old. She had brown hair pulled back under a plain baseball cap, civilian clothes, dark jacket, worn jeans, hiking boots that had seen actual use, and the kind of stillness that some people are born with and others are in the hard way. She had earned hers. The gate guard checked her visitor's pass twice. His name tag said Millard. Young, bored, clearly waiting for rotation. Reason for visit, ma'am? She held up the foil pan. Cake. He blinked. Cake. For my husband, Captain Marcus Voss. He's with 2nd Platoon. Millard checked his clipboard, confirmed the name, handed back her pass. Visitor protocol, ma'am. You stay inside the wire. You stay in the common area or the CO's building. You don't go near the armory or the comms tower. Understood, she said. He waved the truck through. In the passenger seat beside her, the convoy's civilian liaison, a logistics contractor named Hal who had been making this run for 2 years, glanced sideways at her. First time visiting the FOB? Yes, she said. She was not lying. She had never been to FOB Kiran before. What Hal didn't ask, and what Diana Voss didn't volunteer, was where else she had been. The answer would have taken longer than the remaining 400 meters to the main lot. Captain Marcus Voss met her at the edge of the common area with the expression of a man who had been told he was getting a surprise and genuinely wasn't sure how to arrange his face. He was tall, broad, through the shoulders, a jaw that hadn't been shaved in 4 days, and eyes that went soft the moment he saw her. He didn't run. He walked, deliberately, the way men do when they're trying not to show how much they've missed someone. You brought cake, he said. It's your birthday. You drove 4 hours and got on a convoy into Kiran province because it's my birthday. The roads are fine. He laughed once, low and quiet, and pulled her in. She let him, her hand pressed flat against the back of his jacket. Behind him, 2 junior enlisted observed from what they thought was a safe distance. That's the captain's wife, Private DeLuca murmured. She looks like someone who gives out homework, said Private First Class Reyes. She did not look like someone who gives out homework, but Reyes wouldn't understand that until later. Marcus walked her toward the common area, carrying the cake, their shoulders close. The base hummed around them. Generators. The distant rhythm of a helicopter somewhere over the ridge. The smell of diesel and dust, and the particular dryness of mountain air at altitude. You look tired, she said. We've had contact 3 nights running. Nothing serious. RPG at the eastern wall, some small arms fire. How close? He paused just long enough to tell her the truth was closer than the answer. Close enough, but the perimeter held. She looked toward the eastern wall, then toward the watchtower. Her eyes moved the way she'd been trained, cataloging, measuring, identifying. She wasn't doing it consciously anymore. It was just how she saw the world. There were 2 entry points visible from the common area. The watchtower had 1 man posted, no backup visible. The main gate was solid, but the HESCO barriers on the northeastern corner were lower than they should have been. A gap between the second and third section, partially covered by razor wire that wouldn't stop a determined man, only slow him down. She noted it, said nothing. "How long can you stay?" Marcus asked. "I have to be gone by dark. Convoy leaves at 1600. Then we got time." She looked at him, the tiredness around his eyes, the set of his jaw. "Sit down," she said. "Eat cake with me." He smiled. For a few minutes, they were just 2 people who missed each other, sitting in the sun in one of the most dangerous places on earth, with chocolate cake and a birthday candle that kept blowing out in the wind. It was the last quiet moment either of them would have for the next 6 hours. At 13:42 local time, the radio tower went quiet. Not all at once. It happened gradually, the way pressure drops before a storm, one frequency cutting out, then a second, then the whole board going to static. Sergeant Communications Specialist Faro noticed it first, sitting in the comms room with his headset on, frowning at a panel that had just stopped making sense. He tried a backup channel. Nothing. Emergency frequency. Dead air. He picked up the field phone to alert the duty officer. The line clicked once. Then silence. That was when the first mortar round hit the eastern wall. The sound wasn't what most people expected. It wasn't a clean boom. It was a concussive crack followed by a deep, tectonic shudder that moved through the ground and up through the soles of your boots. The HESCO barriers absorbed most of it, but the northeastern corner, the gap Diana had noticed 20 minutes earlier, fractured. One section tipped and fell outward. Then the second round hit. Closer. The base erupted in motion. Men running, orders being shouted, boots hammering on gravel. The alert siren went off 3 seconds after it should have. In the common area, Diana was already moving before the siren. Not running. Moving. There was a difference. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Get inside. The hardened building, east side. Where are your snipers posted?" He blinked. "What?" "Your overwatch." "Where are they?" "2 on the watchtower, 1 on the western roof." "Why are you?" "Because the attack is coming from the northeast, and your tower has 1 man and a blind angle." She said it the way she might say the coffee's gone cold. Factual. Unhurried. Already looking at the northeastern wall. Marcus stared at her for half a second. That particular half second, when a person sees something in someone else they hadn't expected to find. "Diana, where's the armory?" Here's the thing about Diana Voss that nobody at FOB Kiran knew, because nobody had thought to ask. She had spent 9 years as a Special Operations Forces advanced sniper before she left the program. Not because she was asked to leave, because she chose to. She had finished her final qualification at 31 years old with a confirmed record at 1,100 meters in a crosswind that the instructor had called, quietly, into his logbook, extraordinary. She had 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Syria, and a classified rotation she never spoke about that had taken her somewhere the maps didn't name. She had met Marcus at a friend's barbecue in Virginia Beach. He had offered her a burger, and she had accepted. He had not known what she did for a living. She had not told him right away. On their 3rd date, she had. He had said, after a long, quiet moment, "Okay, are you still doing it?" "No," she had said. "I got out 6 months ago." "Why?" She had looked at him steadily. "Because I'd done enough, and I wanted to try a different kind of life." He had nodded. Hadn't pushed. Hadn't flinched. That was when she knew she was going to marry him. But trained is trained. And the skills she had spent 9 years building didn't go quiet just because she'd handed in her credentials. They lived in her hands, in her eyes, in the way she breathed when a situation required stillness. FOB Kiran was about to require a great deal of stillness. The breach in the northeastern wall was deliberate. They'd hit it twice before realizing the 3rd round would punch a gap wide enough. By the time the base responded, 6 men had come through, not sprinting, moving tactically, using the smoke and dust from the mortar impacts as concealment. 14 of Gramir's personnel were immediately pinned. They'd taken cover behind the motor pool vehicles, the low concrete wall near the laundry building, and the exposed section of the supply depot. Good instinct. Wrong geometry. The attackers had the angle on every single position. The watchtower man, Corporal Edmonds, was exchanging fire, but he was outflanked. His angle didn't cover the eastern side of the motor pool, and he knew it. Every time he shifted position to compensate, he lost coverage somewhere else. In the comms room, Faro was still trying to raise anyone on any frequency. The jamming was sophisticated, military grade. Whoever had planned this had not done so quickly. 3 men were already down. None confirmed critical, but none mobile either. From the hardened building's secondary window, pressed flat against the wall, Diana watched. She had the armory key in her hand, obtained from a confused supply sergeant who had opened the door because she had said, with complete calm and absolute authority, "I need to pull a long rifle right now." He had not questioned the tone. People rarely did. In her hands was an M110 semi-automatic sniper system. She'd used one before. Not her preferred platform, but she knew its drift at range, its trigger pull, the way it settled when properly supported. She ran her hands over it without looking, checking it the way she once checked her own weapon every morning before first light. Marcus appeared at the doorway. "Diana, I need you to," he stopped. Looked at the rifle. Looked at her. His voice shifted. "How long since you've been behind a glass?" 8 months. "Can you still?" "Yes." One word. She said it the way people say yes when the question is almost an insult. "Edmonds is blind on the eastern motor pool," she said. "I need the roof of the supply building. Who do I tell to hold the door?" "You're not military personnel." "No, but I'm the only other person on this base who has used one of these in combat." He held her gaze. It was the longest 2 seconds of his life, because in those 2 seconds, he was both the man who loved her and the officer responsible for everyone inside the wire. And those 2 roles required the same answer. "Sergeant Cole," he said. "Southwest corner. I'll radio him." She was already moving. The supply building's roof was exposed on 2 sides. Not ideal, but the angle was better than anywhere else available, and the partial chimney stack near the eastern edge gave just enough profile cover to work from prone. Diana crossed the open ground between the hardened building and the supply depot at a low run, using the smoke to cover her movement the way she'd been taught to use everything: terrain, weather, timing, attention. She hit the exterior ladder and climbed without pausing. On the roof, she went flat. No hesitation, no settling period. She was already calm because she had decided to be calm before she left the building. That decision had been made the moment the first mortar hit. She found her support, extended the bipod, adjusted her position by 2 inches, put her eye to the optic. The scene below clarified in layers. Smoke drifting from the wall breach. Men in cover who couldn't advance. And across the motor pool, 2 shooters working from behind a disabled personnel carrier, laying down suppressive fire that had everyone else pinned. She measured the distance. Estimated the wind. The mountain air at this altitude moved differently than the coastal ranges she trained in, but the principles didn't change. She had 300 and some meters to the further target. Her breathing slowed. 1 full cycle. In. Hold. Out. She fired. The suppressive fire from behind the personnel carrier stopped. Not reduced. Stopped. Down below, there was a pause. The kind that happens when something unexpected changes the equation. A fraction of a second where both sides registered that something had shifted. She was already acquiring the second target. For minutes. That was how long it took. Not 4 minutes of continuous shooting. For minutes of measured, deliberate, surgical fire from a position nobody had been looking at, from a woman nobody had thought to account for. The first 2 targets had provided the suppressive fire that was holding 14 men down. Without them, those men could move. And they did. The moment the angle opened, Sergeant Cole pushed forward with 4 others, taking back the motor pool position in 30 seconds of controlled, aggressive movement. The third target was positioned high, on a ridge spur just beyond the wall breach, directing the breach team by hand signal. He had a radio, probably serving as the relay to whoever was jamming communications from outside the wire. Diana found him at 460 meters. The wind had shifted. She adjusted 3 clicks. Fired once. The radio fell into the rocks below. The jamming cut out 40 seconds later. Not because the jammer itself was destroyed, but because the man running it lost his coordination signal and made a mistake. Faro got a partial frequency open and screamed for QRF at the top of his lungs. The remaining 3 men in the breach did what men do when the plan stops working. They split apart. 1 went north. 2 went south. The one going north ran directly across Diana's sight line at 220 meters, moving fast. He didn't make it to cover. The 2 moving south encountered Sergeant Cole's team, now flanking, and that problem resolved itself without her involvement. Total time from her first shot to the breach team being neutralized for minutes, 17 seconds. Total rounds fired from the M110, 7. 7 rounds. 4 targets. 14 men who walked out of that motor pool on their own legs instead of being carried. She stayed on the roof. She didn't stand, didn't call out, didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. She kept her eye on the breach, scanning the ridge beyond, because a secondary wave was always possible and the job wasn't finished until the situation was stable. That was the part most people didn't understand about her profession. The shooting was maybe 20% of it. The rest was patience, watchfulness, refusing to declare something over before it actually was. She held the roof for another 11 minutes. Nothing came. Then she stood, cleared the weapon, and descended the ladder. The base was processing what had just happened the way bases do, in overlapping waves of activity, voices, radio checks, medics moving, officers trying to reconstruct a timeline of something that had moved faster than any timeline could capture. Marcus found her near the supply building. She was handing the M110 back to the supply sergeant, who looked like he was trying to remember how to breathe. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked. "No, Diana. I'm not hurt, Marcus." He exhaled. It came out uneven. The exhale of someone who had spent 4 minutes watching their wife on a rooftop in a combat situation and discovered, in that span of time, that they had never really known the full shape of the person they'd married. "You could have. I was fine. You were in the open. I was prone behind a chimney stack at 300 meters. I've worked from worse." She looked at him steadily. "You okay?" He laughed. One short, helpless sound. "Am I okay? You took cover right away. You made good decisions. I didn't know my wife was going to become the base's overwatch." She tilted her head slightly. "I was only visiting." Behind them, Corporal Edmonds had come down from the watchtower. He'd seen everything from his elevated position, or as much as the smoke had allowed. He stopped when he saw her. "Ma'am," he said, slowly. "Was that you? On the supply roof?" She looked at him. "The shots on the carrier position. That was you?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Young face doing something complicated. "I've been on 3 deployments. I've never seen anyone shoot like that." She picked up the foil pan she'd set down near the building's base when she'd retrieved the rifle. The birthday cake, still wrapped, somehow unscathed. "Happy birthday," she said to Marcus. He stared at the cake, stared at her. "You brought me a cake and clear my motor pool." The cake was the plan. She handed it to him. The other thing was improvised. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hargrove, had the kind of career that prepared you for most situations. He had not been prepared for this one. He sat across from Diana Voss in the small conference room, the one usually used for operational planning, now being used for something he didn't quite have a form for, and read through what Sergeant Cole had written up in the initial contact report. He read it twice. Then he set it down and looked at her. 7 rounds, he said. "Yes, sir." 4 confirmed engagements. "Yes, sir." In 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I wasn't timing. Hargrove leaned back. He was in his early 50s, had the face of a man who'd seen serious things and chosen to keep them internal. "Mrs. Voss," I need to ask about your background. For the record, former Staff Sergeant, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Advanced Sniper Qualification, 3rd Generation Precision Weapons. I left active service 14 months ago. He nodded slowly. And you didn't think to mention this when you came through the gate. I came to bring my husband a cake. Yes, I understand. He paused. I'm going to be honest with you. When I was told a civilian woman had taken a sniper position on the supply roof during an active engagement, I thought we were going to have a significant problem. She waited. I was wrong, he said. What you did this afternoon saved lives. Sergeant Cole has told me that without your fire on the motor pool position, his team couldn't have moved. 3 men in cover that were already wounded and couldn't maintain suppression. It would have gone the other way. She said nothing. I also understand that you identified the northeastern wall gap as a vulnerability before the attack. Is that correct? I noticed it when I came through. You didn't report it. I've been on the base for 20 minutes. I didn't know who to tell. He absorbed that. Would you have told someone eventually? She looked at him steadily. I was going to ask Marcus about it before the convoy left. Hargrove was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm going to ask you something and I want an honest answer. All right, did any part of you know something was coming? Before the first round hit, the question hung in the air. She didn't answer immediately, and that pause itself was the answer, really. I noticed things, she said finally. The watchtower coverage, the wall gap. The comms tower had an unusual pattern this morning. I could hear the frequency quality from near the common area. It had that quality that comms get when something is interfering at low level. Building up. She paused. I didn't think attack. I thought something's not right. But I didn't have enough information to say it with certainty. Hargrove looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Voss, he said quietly, I'm going to strongly recommend to your husband that you visit more often. She looked at the foil pan in the corner of the room. That's going to be up to him. He found her outside afterward. The base had settled into the particular post-incident hum. Activity that was urgent, but no longer chaotic. Medics rapping, engineers patching the wall, QRF standing down, someone already taking inventory of the supply building roof. She was sitting on a concrete barrier near the common area. Her jacket off, hands resting on her knees, looking at the mountains the way she always looked at things. Not blankly, but attentively, like they might say something worth hearing. He sat beside her. They were quiet for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Not accusing, just asking. She turned to look at him. Tell you what, that you could do that. She thought about it. I told you I was a sniper. You told me you had been. As in past tense. As in, that was a chapter of my life that's done. It is done. Diana, being capable of something isn't the same as doing it. I haven't done it in over a year. I didn't know if I still could until I was up there. She paused, and then I was. He processed that. Does it feel different? Doing it here today without. It feels like the same thing it's always felt like, she said. I was trying to keep people alive. The uniform doesn't change that. He looked at her profile, the evenness of it, the lack of drama. The woman who had driven 4 hours with a birthday cake and ended up holding a perimeter. I should have asked more questions, he said. When you told me you'd gotten out, I assumed it meant you were done with all of it. I'm done with all of it. I haven't carried a rifle in 14 months. She looked at him. Today was not me going back. Today was me being in a place where there was a job, and I was the one who could do it. That's not a small distinction. No, she agreed. It's not. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. The cake survived, she said. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Yeah, it's your birthday. It is. Do you want to eat cake? He looked at her. This quiet, steady, extraordinary woman he had somehow gotten to marry, and nodded once. Yeah, he said, I really do. 3 weeks later, the northeastern wall at FOB Kiran had been fully reinforced. New HESCO stacking. A second man posted to the watchtower. A revised comms monitoring protocol that checked for low-frequency interference every 90 minutes. Small changes. Obvious changes in hindsight. The kind that someone should have caught before. Corporal Edmonds put in for sniper qualification 2 months after the incident. When his platoon commander asked what prompted it, he gave an answer that made it into the informal history of the FOB, past person to person the way stories are, without a memo or a briefing or a PowerPoint. I watched someone do it right, Edmund said, and I realized I've been watching it done wrong my whole career. Sergeant Cole wrote one additional line in his after-action report. The official report had already been submitted, so this one went nowhere official. He wrote it anyway, in his own notebook, and kept it. The individual responsible for breaking the motor pool suppression was not military personnel. She was the captain's wife. She came to deliver a birthday cake and ended up covering our advance from an unsupported rooftop position at 300 meters in unfamiliar terrain on a platform she hadn't used in over a year. 7 rounds, 0 misses. I have nothing to add to that. Hargrove sent a formal letter of commendation to the Department of the Army. The response he received back was polite, administrative, and completely inadequate to the situation. He framed the inadequate response and hung it on his office wall as a reminder that bureaucracy occasionally encountered things it didn't have the right form to describe. Diana Voss went home on the 1600 convoy, same as she planned. The cake was mostly eaten by the time she left. At the gate, Corporal Miller checked her visitor's pass again on the way out. He hadn't been in the motor pool during the incident, but word had gotten to him by mid-afternoon. He looked at her visitor's badge, then at her face. "Ma'am," he said, "next time you come." He stopped. "Try to find the rest of it." She waited. "You don't need to bring cake," he said finally. "Just so you know, you're welcome here." She looked at him for a moment, not unkindly. "The cake," she said, "was always the point." She stepped through the gate and didn't look back. The mountains were still there, rising broken and indifferent against the late afternoon sky. The bass hummed behind her with the sound of people who were alive and working and would go home eventually. That was the whole point. That was the only point. She had never needed anyone to know what she could do. She had needed something to require it. And in the space between those two things, between capability and necessity, that was where people like Diana Voss spent their lives waiting quietly, birthday cake in hand, for the moment that asked everything of them. And delivering. Would you have picked up that rifle? Or would the training have felt like a lifetime ago? And here's the real question. How many people are walking around right now with that kind of history, that kind of capability, that nobody has thought to ask about yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reminded you that the most formidable person in the room is usually the one nobody clocked as a threat, like subscribe and hit that bell icon. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that ordinary and dangerous are not mutually exclusive. Your next story is already on your screen. Go watch it now.